This is Eric Zanotto here. I'm like Cody. I'm one of the primary ops chiefs on the Rocky Mountain team, and we've been utilizing the strategic risk position as a primary ops for about 4 years on our team, and we've been working in concert with Rick Statton's group to practice utilizing all of the tools and putting them to use. So we're going to talk about the Balsinger fire, and this fire was located in Region One in Montana. It was on the Helena National Forest. It was a was near the White Sulphur Springs area. It was about 15-20 miles uh, east of White Sulphur Springs. And when we took this fire over, we took it over from another Type 1 incident management team. Resources were definitely scarce at the time, and California, the Dixie and Caldor fires were really primed up and starting to grow. So much of our resources were getting reassigned out to California. So that left us with three large fires. We had the American Fork fire, and it was sitting at about 30,000 acres. We had the Woods Creek fire, which was about 75,000 acres, and we had the Balsinger fire, and it was about 10,000 acres. And as we were losing resources, the weather was changing a little bit, so we contacted Rick and let him know we were going to go into strategic a plan on this thing and started working with him for some line comparison. And I will be able to bring ours up and show it. I know Cody had mentioned it in his presentation. So as we move forward, we started developing a plan, and we broke it out into divisions, and we started utilizing the uh, suppression difficulty index and the potential control line feature, and we kind of developed our pods from scratch out on this fire. There was several communities at risk. They were not huge communities, but nonetheless very valuable communities, and they were right in proximity of the fire. So we started running IR. We had some issues with the IR there, so we the national IR wasn't working well for us at the time. So we ordered in a drone with IR capabilities, and we started running UAS missions on it, and really drilling in on what kind of heat we had in there within the fire spread. During this time, we were notified that um, five hotshot crews had turned down the assignment of going in and picking this fire up direct. So we got to thinking that not only was it bad, but we need to look at the science behind whether the science supports the decision of not going direct, and it certainly did. The evacuation time was bright red. The the suppression difficulty index was bright red, and the potential control line, there was no control lines for potential in the area of the fire. So we started going into discussions with the Montana State DNR as well as the local forest, and talking about how we were going to likely need to leave this fire primarily unstaffed and put our resources on potential control lines on the larger fires that we could have a probability of success with an acceptable amount of risk. Those conversations went fairly well, but we were developing all of that on the fly, which we are fairly used to. Uh, but in this case, it was a little tenuous at times, but it went well, and we ended up taking this PowerPoint that I'm showing you now. We took it up to the local communities that were at risk, and we showed the community this is why we're making the decisions we're going to make. We had Dave Calkin came on site and was kind of watching how we were going about our business and how we were utilizing the science. And we came up with some alternatives. And our first alternative that we came up with was we could go direct. There was a few pros on it. We would be able to have on-site personnel for quick response if any of the values that were in the area were at risk. We would be able to reduce the threat to the values, and we would lower the inconvenience to communities as they were all in pre-evac. But the cons list that we came up with was pretty high. There would be a high risk to line personnel. There would be a number of resources committed in an already scarce time. It would take, we estimated, 7 to 8 hotshot crews to get around this fire. The commitment for aviation resources would be extremely high, which would raise the risk to the aviators. And the logistic support would be extremely difficult and expensive. And the cost would be completely astronomical on this fire. So it was an alternative. We looked at it, we thought about it, and we ran the second one, which would be just a remote observation and resource deployment as needed. We were able to lower the risk to firefighters and aviators. Um, we were able to shrink the amount of time that the resource commitment would be needed, and we would be able to lower the cost. That was the pros. Some of the cons, the risk part of this, should the fire behavior rapidly escalate, uh, we would not be able to put the resources there in a timely fashion to protect the identified values. Developing and communicating a clear message to the cooperators and to the communities and the rationale of this alternative and how it might be more difficult in the long run. And the duration of commitment to execute this alternative wouldn't be great either for the local resources. So our last alternative we studied was point protection deployment of resources along the Highway 89 corridor, which really would be where most of the values were located. And this one here would be, we would continue to observe it and if it were to establish below Highway 89, we would be able to send resources up. Again, there was some resource commitment cons that we weren't real big on, and developing the clear communication to the community would be very difficult, but doable. We'd have to get into a proactive planning for structure protection and all the other values at risk. That's a good thing. We could do that for the local unit. The combination of remote and on-site observations will provide a high level of awareness for any evolving threat. So we would have people there to see if any fire would go through. And this slide here, we ended up going with option B. We just continued to monitor the fire and not do anything really. We did a very little work up on 89. We did finish the prep work along the structures that would be threatened. But that's where we landed. And we did a line comparison, which shows if we were to go in and go direct, this is what the actual perimeter of the fire would look like. You can see that this line comparison, Cody had mentioned this in his presentation. There's quite a bit of red and quite a bit of the orange in this that shows that this would be very difficult line to put in. And this also would be very difficult ground to get an injured firefighter out. And this little chart on the side shows that we had 0 miles of low and less than a tenth of a mile of low, and very low was 0. Medium low, we had just over a mile. Medium was at 2, and medium high was at 3. And then we had greater than a mile of the very high. So these choices became obvious. We should not be putting firefighters in there to take the direct attack. So that was off the table. Here's our ground evacuation times. You can see most of it was in greater than 2 to 4 hours. And some of it was even greater than 6 hours. So it wasn't a spot that we could comfortably put firefighters in and know that we were putting them in a good situation. And the probability of success based on our SDIs and PCLs was extremely low as well. So here's the line comparison for the PCL. You can see it's the dark colors. That means it's going to be very difficult and there's really no potential for any kind of line location in the area. This is the larger view of the suppression difficulty index. You can see the Balsinger perimeter here in this light pink, and it's pretty much solid red everywhere where we did not put firefighters in. So our decisions were supported by the science, and we were able to put together a presentation to show the local forest, and that turned out to be a very good thing. We had lots of meetings and a lot of conversations to get everybody on board, but it was a great example of putting together all the research work and coming together with a plan of what we're going to leave.